Tolkien had a time travel story in Histories of Middle-earth, The Lost Road. As friends and fellow members of the literary circle known as the Inklings, JRR Tolkien and C.S. Lewis embarked on a challenge. Lewis was to write on space travel and Tolkien on time travel. Tolkien's unfinished story, The Lost Road, chronicles the original destruction of Númenor, a pivotal event of the Second Age of Middle-earth. The story starts with Alboin, a young boy who would be about 12 at the time. He was wondering about his name and how it is perceived by his classmates. He expresses this to his father, Oswin Errol. So I took Alboin, for it is not Latin and not Northern, and that is the way of most names in the West, and also of the men that bear them. I might have chosen Albinus, for that is what they sometimes turned the name into, and it wouldn't have reminded your friends of bones. But it is too Latin. It means something in Latin. It means elf friend, though it is a Latinized form of the term, but not Latin nor Northern like most names in the West. Alboin would look out of his window that night and see Númenor as the sea beyond the edge of a cliff while the sun sets. He would continue learning Latin in school along with Greek, Old English, Norse, Welsh, and Irish, which were mainly the Old Northern languages. This was not encouraged even by his father, who shared his love for languages, which they would spend the rest of the chapter discussing. Alboin would later have a son, Alboin, who was about 16 at that time of chapter 2. Alboin would remember the evening he had with his father, and he would continue discussing languages and dreams with his son. He would find out that the dreams started to become more frequent and absorbing, but he wouldn't be able to explain just that he had seen Eris Sand. He would start to wish there was a time machine, which he would express mainly to go back to the past. I wish there was a time machine, he said aloud, but time is not to be conquered by machines. And I should go back, not forward, and I think backwards would be more possible. Then Elendil appeared, giving Alboin his spoken desire to go back in time. But he had to go with his son, Alboin, who would be Herendil. Alboin would fall into a silence like he had left the world completely. This would frustrate Alboin, who was looking forward to a long walk with his father. Little did he know that his father was having a dream about walking with him, and eventually chose to take Elendil's offer. Alboin sat, his head rested on one arm, his eyes were closed. He seemed asleep. He made no sign. Alboin was creeping out of the room, heavy with disappointment. There was nothing for it but an early bed and perhaps better luck tomorrow. As he reached the door, he thought he heard the chair creak, and then his father's voice, far away and rather strange in tone, murmuring something. It sounded like Herendil. He was used to odd words and names slipping out in a murmur from his father. Sometimes his father would spin a long tale round them. He turned back hopefully. "Good night," said Alboin. "Sleep well, Herendil. We start when the summons comes." And his head fell back against the chair. Dreaming, thought Alboin. "Good night." And he went out and stepped into sudden darkness. That would be the last you would hear from Alboin and Alboin before the next two chapters about Elendil, the Númenorian chapters set in Númenor and mainly concerning the last alliance of the Second Age. The Lost Road can be read without having read any of Tolkien's works or extensive knowledge of Middle-earth. Much like Lord of the Rings, The Lost Road seems to be written in novel form, though it would have some commentary from Christopher Tolkien. It was said in a commentary that Alboin was closely followed by Tolkien's own life, except that Alboin was not an orphan and Tolkien was not a widower. Alboin was born in February 4th, 1890, and Alboin on September 1918. Alboin and Alboin were taken from the Lombardic legend, and so was Rosamund, a name his parents initially had in mind in the first chapter. Alboin was a 6th century king of the Lombards who conquered northern Italy in the 500s, and his spouse was Rosamund, a Lombard queen. Alboin was his father. There was also a reference to a substratum which involves a great importance as it points to a change in language. While it is a time travel story, much of chapters 1 and 2 seems to also revolve around language as well. It seems to either mark or be part of the beginning of Tolkien's development of Elvish languages. The story of Alboin and Alboin ends after Chapter 2 and shifts towards Elendil, possibly since the work is unfinished.